Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to Friday Elevate.Strategy Leadership Live Unplugged. Really missed you guys last week. I have to apologize. My guest that was booked last week had to postpone last moment. So instead of coming up for another Ask Me Anything Friday, I just decided to take a break, right? So hope you guys didn't miss me too much. I'm sure you didn't. You probably missed my guest though, which is great. So we have a wonderful guest lined up for you today again. He is a gentleman through and through, and we'll introduce him later on. But first, yeah, I mean, if you're here live, drop a note. Let me know where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. Always great to see people post-production as well. All your notes, really thank you for that. A lot of feedback around questions that I ask, maybe the way that I look, how my hair is. So thank you very much for that. But and also reaching out to some of my guests. So post-production guys, drop a line for us as well, and also for my guests as well today. But if you're here now, please drop a comment below. Let me know where you're from, especially if you're a fan of Don Duval, who's my guest today. I know some of his colleagues might be online right now, but I would love to hear from you. But so without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our guest today. And yeah, exciting guy. So Don Duval is CEO of NORCAT. Don has spent more than 2 decades leading, growing, and transforming organizations and businesses. As CEO of NORCAT, he has transformed the organization to become a global, multi-faceted enterprise focused on providing programs, services, and resources to prepare current and future workers and tech entrepreneurs with the right skills, competencies, and confidence to succeed. In addition, Don is also the founder and co-managing partner of the Sudbury Catalyst Fund, a unique $5 million co-investment seed capital venture fund based in Sudbury, Ontario. Previously, Don served as VP of Strategy and Operations for the Mars Discovery District, an investment director with Mars Investment Accelerator Fund, and as a senior manager within Deloitte Consulting. He's an active angel investor and holds a variety of board positions. Academically, he holds an undergraduate degree in chemistry from Queen's University and a Master of Applied Science and Engineering from the University of Toronto. So Don is a Canadian through and through, and I love Canadians on my show because I'm a Canadian as well. So without further ado, Don, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Simeon?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think you are probably the third last guest of 2021. So congratulations on that. Yet we're wrapping up with great folks. So
obviously saving the best towards the last, right?
Always. So Don, you and I go back to our days at Deloitte, and that's where I first met you. We worked on 1 or 2 projects together.
Yeah.
And I like to begin off my interviews with some recollection and set of memories because they set the stage for kind of why I invited you on and kind of, what people are going to hear from you. So Don, my impression of you at first was extremely animated. You're a very animated personality, but very kind-hearted. So you were a leader who at the same time was very opinionated and had a lot of feedback, but at the same time very approachable. So I really appreciated that when my time working with you. But shortly, I think you left before I did, and so I've been tracking your career kind of loosely ever since then. So and obviously that's been, I think, almost 20 years now because I left I left in 2006, and I don't remember when you left Deloitte, but
shortly thereafterward.
Oh, after. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
And yeah, so thank you for coming on the show. So the purpose of the show, again, for anybody who's on right now in post-production is obviously career journeys. And so again, the need for stories is greater than ever, especially in this day and age of COVID. And so Don's got a great story to tell us today. So Don, maybe if you could maybe share with the audience what NORCAT is. Maybe a lot of people may not know what that is and kind of what kind of organization it is and what it is that you do as a CEO.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, and even more so, thank you for the kind words as you went down memory lane. That's a really nice way to kick things off, and I really appreciate you saying that.
All true.
Yeah, so by virtue of NORCAT, what do we do? Well, first of all, NORCAT has been in business for coming up 30 years, so it's had a long-standing history in the communities in which we operate. And as a company, we're really driven by what we define as aspirational priorities or mandates or purpose statements. And those purpose statements kind of define what it is that we do. So, first of all, we aspire to be a global leader in all that is skilled labor training and development. So, you can liken it almost to a college like mandate, whereby we are in the business of building content and curriculum and subsequently delivering content and curriculum to various skilled labor industries, primarily mining, construction, and forestry, core industries that are, contributors to Canada's GDP, but we work internationally as well.
Mm.
And essentially, we help these individuals not only be productive, but also safe on the job, all day, every day. So in that mandate, we work in 15 countries around the world. Obviously, our primary operations are in Ontario, where we have 5 offices. And you
Mhm.
can liken our offices almost to mini campuses where we have classrooms and instructors and
Okay.
things like that. But we have 7 offices. The other 2, one is in the US, one is in Latin America in Santiago, Chile. And we work with these, skilled labor industries to assess, what are the challenges you need to improve both the productivity and safety of your workforce. And then we can build content and then subsequently deliver it.
Mhm.
The second aspirational priority we have is, and quite akin to our geography, where our 2 offices are located, based in Sudbury, Ontario. But we aspire to be that global one-stop shop for all that is the future of mining, technology, and innovation. And I say that kind of in tandem with the first aspirational priority because we're quite unique in that we are the only, I'll call it, skilled labor training and development organization and innovation center that owns and operates an underground mine.
Oh,
So within the city of Greater Sudbury, probably about 45-minute drive from the core, we have an underground nickel mine that we run through the mining cycle. We do extraction. We have an offtake agreement with Glencore to acquire the ore. But the primary purpose of that asset really is hands-on experiential training for that would-be future generation of mine workers.
mm.
But
Okay.
also, we've apportioned part of that asset to be a place where technology companies, be they big or small, domestic or international, can use our underground operating environment to develop and test new technologies or products.
Wow. Okay.
And once the intellectual property has been sorted and organized, protected, whatever it might be, those same companies can then use our mine as an extension of their business development sales by virtue of using our site as a reference customer demonstration showcase site with
Wow.
the desired outcome that those technology companies will have um, an opportunity to build a narrative or a marketing story to get to a larger scale production company. So I kind of tie those, aspirational goals together in that the innovation part of our skilled labor training and development is actually quite unique in that we're the only organization that does training and development in mining that owns a mine.
Mm.
Amongst our 7 locations, we have, classrooms and instructors, kind of traditional instructor-led programs. And then we do a whole array of online e-learning programs. But the unique innovation component to that is we have the world's largest mining equipment operator simulation center. So
Wow.
you can envision those, a piece of operator equipment. Picture one of those big yellow pieces of industrial equipment you see in construction, forestry, or mining.
Right.
To train those operators, we have the technology and the hardware where you can sit on one of those 360-degree motion platforms, learn to
Mhm.
operate the equipment in a safe and controlled environment to be more productive on the job. That coupled with we have what we call Studio NORCAT, which is a pretty unique facility where we develop proprietary learning technologies, be it in augmented reality or in virtual reality. So those are kind of the 2 primary drivers of our business. But our third aspirational priority, akin to the Mars experience, is that we operate a regional innovation center to work with
Mm.
community partners to either help start innovative, scalable, tech-oriented companies, or if they're already on their way, we help them grow and grow fast because that's a core contributor to our country's job and wealth creation. So
Mhm.
identifying those companies and helping them grow is it's a core ingredient to our competitiveness as a nation. So we focus on that as well. So that's kind of the aspirational piece is what we do. We define NORCAT as the NORCAT group of companies because we have an in-house consultancy, we have commercial real estate, we have a venture capital fund, we have 7 locations, we're in 14 countries working. It's a fairly exciting place to be. I'll say that.
Right. I didn't know that you own a mine. Okay.
Well, and Simeon, I use that term maybe somewhat provocatively in that it's a long-term lease, which would be akin to ownership, in that we adhere to all the regulatory requirements in the
Yeah.
various ministries, be it federal or provincial, and we have the liability of full ownership. So, yes, I use that term, but for those who are, very tactical, scrutinizing my words, it is a long-term, greater than 30-year lease on the facility. So we define it as ownership internally.
So is it almost like a lab for students, or what to test out and try, and then incubators for companies that are trying to implement technology?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, half of our mandate, if you can envision walking into the underground mine, you could see, metaphorically speaking, half of it as a training and development educational center, learning pieces of equipment, learning fundamental skills, for that would-be or existing miners to build a competence and confidence in whatever function they are being taught. Then you kind of look on the other half of the mine, and you would see a venture-backed startup trialing a new technology in some aspect of underground mining. And part of the rationale for the focus in that is obviously mining is a niche market, but it's a big and important market, not only for Canada, but many jurisdictions around the world. And the global mining industry is going through what I often refer to as a technology transformation, whereby there is increasing pressure on these mining companies to improve productivity, competitiveness, shareholder value, safety. And concurrent to that pressure is recognition that the global mining industry has undergone I'll say a gradual divestiture of in-house capacity to do their own R&D as a proprietary competitive advantage. So gone are the days where these global mining companies had sophisticated large engineering departments with people trying to develop their own, hardware to be more competitive than their neighboring mining company. So now they have to buy it. And one of the core challenges in the mining industry is that operationally, they are extremely risk adverse. They are not going to spend a lot of money to acquire, adopt, and deploy emerging technologies that isn't proven. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So how do you de-risk operational technology? You look somewhere else where it's been deployed and operational. We solve that first customer problem for about 80% of the clients that come to us. They were their first product as a startup venture-backed company, or if it's a multi-billion-dollar OEM, they might have a piece of battery electric equipment that's mobile that they want to test to see how it works. They'll bring that first product to us in order to build that narrative, and then so then they can bring subsequent customers to say, hey, this is how it works. Yes, it's been operating underground for 6 months. Now you build that confidence to expedite a potential procurement decision by a would-be buyer from a mining company, because they've now seen it working, not in a gymnasium, not in a football field, not in a laboratory, in an operating mine environment. So your phrase of a bit of an active laboratory is 100% accurate. We often use that term when we're speaking about what it is that we do to really drive and expedite commercialization. So there's a lot of entities that would argue that they're similar to us that are operating, that are underground tunnels, not an operating mine. And it's entirely different. The general workings of that operating environment means a lot based on feedback we get both from the tech side or the sell side and the mining companies, the buy side. So if you have that, referenceable operating structure, it matters. And we're excited because this in itself is a bit of a giant experiment in what can we do to expedite transformation, technology adoption in legacy industries. We're actually looking to use our demonstrable success using an underground operating mine to expedite technology adoption in a critical industry to Canada's competitiveness and a core contributor to employment and GDP. But how can we take those learnings and transpose them to manufacturing, to healthcare? Are there other operating type environments where we can use that get business done, but slightly repurpose them to give a chance to these emerging tech companies to get their first reference customer. So
Right.
we see a
Right.
fairly meaningful platform that we've been gathering data and insight over the last, 6 or 7 years to validate, the
Mhm.
best thing you can give to an emerging tech company is a purchase order. How do you
Right.
get to that?
Yeah.
How do you get to that point? Give them a referenceable, demonstrable operating site to build that narrative to then get to that larger scale market opportunity. So
Mhm.
it's a bigger, grandiose initiative that will have
Right.
hopefully some meaningful outcomes to really inform public policy as it relates to transforming and ensuring the competitiveness of our legacy industries in Canada.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the I mean, anyone who's watching, who's been in tech startups, will know that one of the hardest things is to get proof of concept, right? Is to show that you've gone from the lab to commercialization. That first point is to say, well, does this actually work in real life, right?
Yeah.
If you can show that, then yeah, I mean, you get your first purchase order that way, and that's the beauty of having an incubator is a startup accelerator is always great in that it helps put pieces together that might be missing, right? Because it comes
Yeah.
from business savvy people who are
Yeah.
investors. So that's really, really awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the skill side because when I read, and I was just reading your bio to the audience about training at skilled and people in COVID. A lot of my clients that I coach, we talk a lot about retooling, right? We talk about upskilling. We talk a lot about kind of what's needed in the new COVID environment for working. Um, on that side of things, what's your perspective on kind of maybe not specifically on a subject matter like mining, but in general, what would you say people need to kind of keep an eye on as far as tooling themselves, making their relevancy in the future going forward?
Yeah, well, not specific to mining, but if I generalize the skilled labor industries in totality in developed economies, so using Canada as a
Mhm.
meaningful example, there's a critical skilled labor shortage in our country. Be it manufacturing, mining, forestry, construction, it doesn't matter. There is a huge demand for talent to fulfill an array of diverse jobs.
Gotcha.
These skilled labor industries arguably are the basis of what we would define as legacy industries, ones that are critically important to our country's GDP, that are undergoing, I would say, significant pressure to innovate, however you want to define that. They need to drive more value, be more
Hmm.
productive, be more
Hmm.
competitive.
Hmm.
So there is I guess a clear vision that to do so, there's going to be some sort of expectation of adopting and deploying new technology. So with that, your comment around reskilling and retooling is critically important. And so how do you do that? How do you do that cost effectively to ensure that you're meeting the needs of those would-be workers?
Right.
And what we're finding quite interesting is, there's a growing expectation among the skilled labor workforce in how they learn, the frequency and of opportunities for ongoing continuous learning and development.
Right.
And it looks very different now. And I'll give you some examples where if you look at some of the survey data from labor market studies, the incoming skilled labor generation has a strong appetite to, progress their career at a reasonable rate. And part of that requires learning new skills on new pieces of technology in a very, cost effective and meaningful way. Gone are the days where a worker simply will sit in front of a computer listening to a narrated PowerPoint for 40 hours over the course of a week and feel as though they're having a meaningful experience to prepare them for that next level.
Right.
You're
Right.
seeing you're seeing kind of a groundswell in, multiple industries across Canada, that it is important on not only the content but also the medium in which you're delivering that content. It has to be meaningful, engaging, and in doing so, not only meets the need of that worker, but it also meets the need of of driving knowledge retention because they've had a meaningful experience. The
Right.
medium is the message, right? Like the Marshall McLuhan philosophy is holding more true than ever. So that is a critical part of the retooling that's needed. And then the other part that's seemingly quite obvious, the rate at which technology adoption is happening and will continue to happen is unbelievably fast.
Hmm.
So the notion of upskilling and retooling, I would say for core skilled trades, it's critical. Get to a college, get the 3 or 4 year program, have the core fundamentals. But the notion of getting into a legacy industry, of where there's going to be ongoing pressure to continuously adopt and deploy new technologies. Gone are the days where you would send that worker for a year-long program and come back, because by the time they get back, it's most likely,
It's
a
changed.
lot of the new things will be outdated. So there's going to
Right.
be this micro-credential, bite-sized learning and development opportunities
Hmm.
that need to be presented almost as incremental learning to drive incremental improvements to stay on trend with the deployment of the emerging technologies. And we're seeing that in mining as a great example. I know I won't belabor mining, but we're seeing, incoming workers looking to identify where are they going to work, and all else equal, they're
Right.
making decisions to work in mining companies that have deployed emerging technology that present that worker with meaningful learning and development opportunities to build the competence and confidence to have skills to operate that. And then there's a reassurance that as that technology evolves, there'll be chances for upskilling, retooling on the job in incremental portions that align to the technology. So
Mhm.
if legacy industries aren't getting that, they're going to fall behind. And not only will they lose the battle for productivity and competitiveness and shareholder value, they're going to lose the battle for talent.
Right.
Money is no longer the primary motivator of this incoming generation. They want that learning and development. They want that meaningful experience. They want that alignment to values. They want that capability potentially to work remotely. So what are the technologies that will enable that? How do you adapt? Money is no longer the primary motivator. Your question, provokes a discussion on how do we surround an employment opportunity with those aforementioned things that I shared.
Right. Well, you're very articulate in that. I think the a lot of people who have sort of grown up in the corporate environment, right? So again, a lot of my clients are executives who sort of worked in, I want to call white collar industry, right? But in the office space, uh, it's a very difficult mind shift set to say, yeah, legacy industries are as such, and they're so critical to the foundation of the country, which is absolutely true, right? So is it that do you see that these industries are trying to capture skills from people who are kind of straight out of college or straight like are they generally speaking the workforce they're gearing towards as like the younger crowd generation and catching them in that catchment kind of thing?
Well, of course, if you look at, labor market studies for some, I guess many, if not all of the legacy industries in Canada, again, is one that we've already shared, the primary driver of talent demand is mostly retirees of the existing
Okay.
generation over the next 5 to 7 years.
Right.
So yes, absolutely, we need to fill that with younger workers given the retirement.
Hmm.
Where we get those younger workers from is a challenge.
Right.
There's a huge push on immigration. There's a lot of talented, skilled individuals in various jurisdictions around the world looking
Right.
for those career opportunities. How do we facilitate and expedite and create a soft landing for this would-be worker generation to have meaningful and fulfilling careers in an important industry, be it whatever, in the Canadian market?
Right.
We need to focus on that. Many of these industries in which, again, using mining as an example, operate in remote, isolated communities where there is burgeoning and meaningful populations of First Nations workers.
Okay.
How do we engage them? How do we develop meaningful content and curriculum that creates not only a job, but a career pathway to create that financial sustainability for said worker? That is
Right.
a difficult thing to do, but it's a task worth doing because
Hmm.
it's a critical cohort to fulfill those meaningful jobs.
Hmm.
So how do you get more women actively involved in the workforce?
Okay.
There's a lot of debate around the importance of daycare.
Hmm.
Daycare is not a women only problem. Daycare is a national economic problem. We
Right.
need to figure out a way to provide the meaningful infrastructure and support to enable this generation of young female workers who want jobs, again, in my world, in the skilled labor industries. They have the capabilities and confidence to do so. So what can we do from a policy perspective to enable them to fulfill those jobs? So there's a lot of moving parts
Right.
that
Right.
we need to think about, and it's going to be a very difficult task, but it's one worth doing to support these industries.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. um you're very ambitious. Very ambitious goals, which is great.
Yeah.
um Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit and wanted to kind of hear about your personal journey story. So, you know, essentially the question really is about, how did you get to where you are today? What are some important decisions that you had to make? And you can go as far back as you want. And some people have gone back to when they're like 6 years old. They're their mother
Oh,
said this to them, and But I mean, what were some of the pivotal moments in your career that kind of brought you to where you are today?
yeah. Well, I wish it was more of a sophisticated story, but let me start with let me start with some milestones that
Yeah, sure.
that might be meaningful. So I think kind of the first thing that I'll share, and it's maybe a moment of levity, and it's not overly
Sure.
sophisticated,
No.
but I was graduating out of Queen's University with a degree in chemistry, 1998, 1999. And I will say the career opportunities for a undergraduate chemistry degree in 1999 relatively limited and modest.
Sure.
There weren't a lot of things that could be done. So I was always impressed with the career facilities within commerce and engineering. And so I knew there was a career center within the institution. So understanding how that worked, I printed out a handful of resumes, went to the career center with the intent of applying to business consulting jobs.
Okay.
And I really am somewhat embarrassed to tell this story, but it's important in terms of a milestone. And if you don't try, you can't, you're not presented an opportunity to win kind of analogy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I walked into the career center early 1999 with 6 or 7 resumes in my hand. And they had these boxes on the walls of various business consulting firms. And I was overwhelmed at the number of tier one Bay Street firms that were recruiting through commerce at Queens.
Right.
And what I ended up doing was look somewhat in my overwhelmedness. I took my resumes and said, well, which ones do I apply to?
Everyone.
And you can envision, for those who have been through that experience, you kind of know what it is. So what I ended up doing was taking resumes and I said, look, I don't know anything about these firms. So I went alphabetical. Anderson, A.T. Kearney, BCG, Bain, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
Nothing more sophisticated than that. And of the 6 or so CVs that I put in the box, I had interviews with 3 firms. Subsequently ended up getting hired with Anderson, Arthur Anderson at the time.
Okay.
And shortly thereafter started my first Bay Street gig. And I highlight that because the amount of time and effort that's needed sometimes to get that first job is extremely important, extremely laborious. And I don't have a sophisticated story. I, by happenstance, was putting resumes in a box,
Hmm. Hmm.
went alphabetically top down,
Yep.
fortunate enough to get that interview
Yep.
and never looked back. And I'll tell you, that first job was probably a critical determinant that
Hmm.
enabled me to be where I am today.
Right. Right.
Anderson Consulting, unfortunately, no longer in business, given some challenges they had 2001, 2002. It was a multi-billion-dollar global 100,000
Hmm.
person company. I had a chance to work and live around the world, surrounded myself with some exceptional people that provided me with a springboard for everything thereafterward.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
I'll tell you, learning business, I was the only individual in my hiring cohort that did not have a business degree.
Okay.
So I was drinking from a fire hose, trying to understand what those individuals had learned in school. So that was
Right.
kind of the first major milestone to get an appreciation as to what a career in business would look like. Through that, I spent time doing the Bay Street consulting thing, lived in the US for about 7 years, learned a ton, spent some time overseas, lived abroad for about a year in Italy, just kind of having fun, did a startup,
Hmm. Hmm.
had a successful exit from that. And that kind of leads me to the next major milestone, which you would be familiar with. I had a unique opportunity in early '06 to meet with the then founder and current CEO of a then startup called the Mars Discovery District. And, that was a happenstance opportunity where I was seated beside someone at a dinner party who had
Hmm.
shared with me his insight as to, hey, there's this new thing that we're starting.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I met with the founder, since passed, but an inspirational gentleman named John Evans, and
Okay.
the then CEO, equally as inspiring, wonderful woman named Ilse Turnick, who retired from Mars, my goodness, probably about 3 years ago now.
Okay.
But I had an amazing opportunity coming in as the head of strategy and operations, employee number 13 or 14,
Right.
charged with the opportunity to figure out what do we do with this wonderful building at the corner of college and university.
Right. Sure.
And my office was bookended by 2 Rhodes Scholars, I had opportunities to meet with the most exceptional people, not only from Canada but around the world,
Yep.
really to
Yep.
think through what does building a world-class innovation hub in downtown Toronto mean for Canada's competitiveness, and how do we win?
Hmm.
So, what an amazing opportunity for a guy in his early 30s. And
Hmm.
and at that time, what's really unique is that there was a very limited landscape in Canada around these organizations that were designed to accelerate and expedite technology,
Right.
venture capital, startups. So, it was akin almost to a blank canvas. Like many of the
Hmm.
ones that you see today, and it's an oversaturated market with these enabling organizations in
Right.
Canada. When we were starting Mars, or when I joined, in late '06, early '07, there wasn't much going on. So what an amazing opportunity to kind of figure that out. So that was another pivotal milestone of joining a startup entity that has now become a global brand. And a lot of what they do today is, quite proudly still structured in the work that we did
Hmm.
when I was there. So very exciting. And
Let me
then, and then most recently, my NORCAT experience. But I'll pause there.
let me pause 1 second. I just want to go back to. I'm always interested in why people make certain small decisions, right? So you did a chemistry degree. What brought you to a chemistry degree and not like a business degree or an engineering degree? Because you think like an engineer. You think like an engineer. I don't know if you know that, but you do. Why?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and not an overly sophisticated answer, but coming out rather of high school, I just had a huge interest in the sciences.
Okay. Yep.
And I knew I would do something in the sciences by virtue of the fact that I had reconciled that my academic experience was going to be doing something I found intellectually challenging and stimulating.
Hmm.
Perhaps if I reflect back, I might have thought, what about getting an education in terms of preparation for a meaningful career and job? But I was fortunate that it worked out well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved chemistry in high school, partially
Right.
motivated by, you hear the cliche story, but it's very true in my perspective.
Your
I
teacher?
had a teacher that was
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely wonderful and inspiring. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's nothing more sophisticated than that. I did not enjoy biology. I did not enjoy physics. I enjoyed chemistry. I enjoyed math. A lot of my degree was rooted in analytical chemistry, which is heavily rooted in calculus and quite sophisticated math, and I loved it.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything more sophisticated than that. It was a degree of interest and intellectual motivation.
Right. And then when you went to looking at applying for consulting jobs, okay, I remember I came from sciences as well, and I knew nothing about business, nothing at all. I probably did one economics course in like, I think I've talked about it before on the show, but in year one, and I was just bored to tears. I didn't know what it is. How did you find out about business? Why consulting? Like I know it's probably a longer period of time that you thought through the process before you went to the career center, but in the end, what was it about consulting that what did you know about it, and what drew you to that?
Yeah, part of the backstory is, by virtue of proximity, you have these serendipitous connections and collisions with fellow students who are in commerce.
Right.
And, by happenstance, I happened to, develop a network of friends. While studying chemistry, they were in commerce. In fact, my roommate in first year was in commerce.
Mm.
And you get insight into what it is that they're studying and some of the work that they do. And then subsequent to that, you kind of self-invite yourself to these career days where the consulting firm comes on campus. And so
Yeah,
you kind of
free
in.
cookies. Yeah, free cookies and coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, be it by invite or not, you kind of make your way in.
Yeah.
And you think that you have a full understanding of what it is based on their description, but in reality, of course, you don't. But what I got from it was that inspiration going, well, that sounds interesting.
Okay.
And I would welcome the opportunity to learn more and have a discussion, that being the interview. So I'll tell you candidly, had it not been for that outward facing networking with peers who were in those areas,
Mm-hmm.
I never would have thought to do that. And I could tell you what, in my interview with Anderson, which to this day I still think was the most amazing career experience at that organization.
Yep.
But in my interview, shortly into the opening narrative, I made a declaration to the person who was interviewing me that I really had limited understanding as to what it meant to have a career in the consulting industry, let alone for Anderson. And one
Mm.
of the nicest pieces of feedback I got is that is refreshing to hear someone say
Right.
because many of these other individuals come in claiming, I fully understand it, I get it.
Right.
No, you don't.
Right.
And so there was a kind of declaration of honesty that, demonstrated further transparency, and one in which they were willing to take a risk that I could learn fast and integrate to be, amongst the same level of knowledge from an academic perspective of my peers who are educated in the commerce world in relatively short order. And, quite proudly, I think I did a pretty good job. After about 6 to 8 months, I kind of got the hang of a lot of the business concepts, not
Yeah.
without many stories that my peers and colleagues could tell you along the way, especially in the first year, where, my goodness, that's for another discussion, Simeon.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there were some things that people rolled their eyes going, how did this guy get in? This
Yeah.
is keep him away from the client. He's asking questions that shouldn't be asked. So, but that's
Listen,
fine, right? You work through that.
So here's a really good lesson to be learned, and something that I've said many times to friends and a lot of my clients as well, which is never underestimate the ability to the lack of knowledge you have about an industry to go in there and succeed, right? Because how often have we sort of walked into a situation where people around the room have been mulling over for like 6 months or like even like 6 weeks, and they just can't get their eyes off of the nitty gritty detail. But you
Yep.
walk in with a fresh set of eyes, and being smart, right? Having a good head on your shoulders, being able to kind of see things differently. And one of the things my dad said to me once was, if you ever want to write a really good thesis to get published, what you got to do is take two disciplines and connect them. So he was a psychology guy too. I'm sorry, he was a chemistry guy too as well. But he basically took chemistry and education, which he loved a lot, and he put the two together and said, "Here's a cross intersection of looking at chemistry through education, and let's publish it." Right? And because
Yeah.
it's refreshing, it's a different take on something that people have been talking about for a lot of years. So I tell people to not be afraid of branching out and taking their resume, even if they're like a senior VP, because you can take one industry and move it into another, sometimes a lot easier than you expect. And it just takes that
Absolutely.
confidence, right? And that gumption to go do that. Yeah. I
Well,
got
and it's a really important comment you make. I personally love and thrive off of that. I'll call it subtle tension of the unknown,
Mm,
where if you look at some of the decisions I've made, and just to simplify it, when I've left a job to go to a new job, it's entirely different. And,
yes.
and there's a huge appetite where I like the stress of the unknown, which some people are terrified by. But
Mm-hmm,
I like the discomfort of, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I have my head fully around what this is.
mm-hmm,
Mars was an experiment when
mm-hmm.
I joined. We weren't sure what we were going to do with this. What
Right.
an amazing, I look at that as an amazing opportunity. Other people might find that extremely discomforting.
Right.
I took a job in Sudbury for a turnaround opportunity in an organization heavily rooted in mining. And Simeon, I had never even been to Sudbury before.
Oh
So
gosh, really?
I knew I had no credentials or background competence in the mining industry.
Right. Right.
So, but I crave that again subtle tension of the unknown that creates that stress that motivates you, that I need to figure out how to learn, how to get smart, how to do it
Mm-hmm,
confidently and quickly. And
mm-hmm.
I find if I have that desire, that it becomes a wonderful journey, and then
Yeah.
it becomes almost a series of micro experiments to try things. You need to exercise good judgment, the right values, all the things
Mm-hmm,
that I'm sure you would advise individuals to think through. But once you've done
mm-hmm.
that, you got to give it a go. Easier said than done. I fully appreciate that,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
that's what motivates me. I have my weird career path. I don't know how you want to define it, but each step has always been doing something that's totally disconnected,
Right.
and
Right.
I probably will live my whole life like that.
Yeah, that's the mind of an entrepreneur, right? Someone who's not afraid of the unknown, but when their back is against the wall, isn't afraid to step up and do something about it, right? Because you don't have a paycheck coming to you on a regular basis. I mean, instability is like the worst enemy of, well, anybody, right? No one likes to be unstable. But
Yeah.
I hazard a guess that if you probably stayed within chemistry as a profession, you probably would be not where you are today as far as like wanting to be exploring the unknown and kind of starting new things up. just because like the traditional things that you study are a lot more stable. You study them because they're stable, right? That you want a job that kind of provides stability. But can I ask you then? So what strung you along the way to make a decision from going from consulting to Mars District, right? Maybe that's a better leap to say innovation kind of, but then string you along to say, well, let's go to Sudbury and try something that's different. It's about skilling and tooling and about incubator. It's about something that's a little more legacy industries you talk about that are different than Mars, which were startup innovate. Like, what's been stringing you along as a common theme?
Yeah, it's, you know what, and I don't intend to portray this as advice for those who are
Yeah,
watching.
that's okay.
And again, it's not intended to be cliche, but every decision I have made has been a function of the people that I have the opportunity to work with.
Okay.
So I can liken it to tactical examples. You made mention, why go from Anderson/Deloitte? There was an acquisition when I went through that. Why
Mm-hmm.
go from there to Mars? I can tell you, it was entirely related to a lady, then CEO, Ilse Turnek.
Okay.
What an inspiring lady to have the opportunity to have meaningful discussions that would take the time to
Mm-hmm.
mentor and support me on my career development, give me a opportunity to take on a meaningful portfolio with, I would say, appropriate credentials, but still a declaration that, we got over 1 million square feet downtown to become a global destination for tech and
Right.
innovation. You
Right.
know, here's the keys, Don. Work with the leadership team, work with the board, work with the founder, work with me, and figure out what programmatically and service-wise do we need to do to be
Right.
the best in the world to enhance Canada's competitiveness. You
Right.
know,
Right.
what an amazing opportunity. And subsequent to that, she still continues to be a huge influence in my life. The exact same example can be replicated when I was interviewing through the recruiting headhunters that brought me to NORCAT.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really great discussion with the recruiting firm, and that in itself is interesting. But I'll tell you, when I met the then board member and then subsequently became the chair, a fellow named Tom Pelangelo, and I use him by name and reference continuously. If it were not for my engagement with him and his ability to have, inspiring discussions to say, here's how I, as chair of the board, when you come on, here's how I will, support you. Here are the things you need to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how I'm going to look out for you. And they're not direct, they're more subtle and engaging. But when you have that connection and confidence, it gives you that ability to make very bold and courageous decisions. Leaving a partner track job at Anderson Deloitte to go join a startup downtown entity called
Mm-hmm.
Mars.
Mm-hmm.
What was I thinking? To
Mm-hmm.
leave a job at Mars where, I was, had the great opportunity to kind of build it and do a whole series of other activities to join a, somewhat
Sudbury.
somewhat struggling organization in Sudbury.
In Sudbury.
What are you doing? So I often reflect on when people say, why did you do what you do? I entirely attribute it to people that inspire me, people that have alignment to my values, people that I believe will, with a high degree of authenticity and sincerity, help me navigate my career to avoid pitfalls based on their shared experiences to inform me and provide that mentorship and guidance. That is so critical. And,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
if you can't find that, I would argue that you run the risk of ending up in an organization where it just won't motivate and inspire, and that sense of purpose, which is critically important, especially in this new generation.
Right.
If you lose that, it's just going to be this ongoing tumultuous cycle of trying to climb this ladder, and you're going to be unhappy and you're going to be disappointed to get promoted. Your career is a journey, and this pressure by some people to hurry up and, I deserve a VP title. I'm 2 years into my job. No, stop. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes toxic and problematic. So find the people, get the alignment to values and culture and spirit, learn as much as you possibly can at a young age, and then use that as a springboard and foundation to keep finding those people that inspire and motivate you and give you that comfort that they'll be there, throughout your journey while you're with that specific company. And it's easier said than done, but it's something that, has informed every decision. Even going back to grad school, Simeon, I happenstance read an article online when I was living abroad in Italy by this lady who had written this report in an academic journal. I emailed her. We developed a friendship. You know, 24 months later, I did my master's in engineering at U of T because of her, Heather McLean,
Yeah.
unbelievably
Yeah.
inspiring. So
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing more sophisticated than that, right? And again, I don't know if that's the norm, but it demonstrates how important that part of my career journey has been.
There's so much more to talk about in that area because, but we won't have time for today. But you know, you have a combination, Don, that a lot of people have work towards, where at the same time you're naturally intelligent, right? You pick up things quickly, but at the same time you're outgoing and you're not afraid of rejection. You're not afraid of someone not responding to your email. I mean, that's the number one thing I hear from my clients is, why hasn't anybody gotten back to me yet, right? I've sent my resume out there, I've networked, I've emailed them, no one's getting back to me. And it's been, how long has it been? It's been a week and a half. I'm like, okay, well, it's been a week and a half. Maybe that person has been gone away. I don't know, but persistence is so key. And I think you've probably not touched on the area of persistence that you've gone for, that you've forgotten about, but you need something like that in order to succeed in that path that you say, because persisting at something is also as difficult as being persisting out of something, right? If you persist out of a managing director partner track into something like, like Mars, that's a persistence, right? That's something that you're seeking after to give up something that's probably very good, right? Anyway, I'd love to have you back to talk about that, because persistence and this idea of pursuing after mentorship or pursuing after relationships, as part of a development of your person, but also development of business, obviously a career,
Yeah.
is so critical. Let me just switch gears. I'm running down on time a little bit, but I do want to ask you. So tell me about your downtimes. So tell me about one or two instances where things have not gotten your way, for example, or things have kind of turned a little different than you expected, that might have caused a little bit of heartache, not heartache, but like heartburn. That's what I mean.
Stress. Yeah. Stress is probably a good way of defining it.
And how do you get through those situations? Like what brings you through that?
Yeah, well, you know what? Not to pull from my earlier comment, but I can tell you with certainty, and I think it would be naive for anyone to say otherwise, that I've had many issues, areas of huge stress within almost every job I have been on, all for very different reasons.
Okay.
And, I liken it to, my experiences at NORCAT. During my 9 years there, we have had some unbelievably complicated, challenging situations that have unfolded within our operations, be they
Hmm.
domestic or international. And I'm not going to paint it as a moment of despair, but these are very challenging issues that we have to work through.
Hmm.
And as CEO, one might assume that, well, the buck stops with me and I got to figure it out. And while it's true, I am ultimately accountable for navigating through it.
Hmm.
I will say this, and again, it's somewhat cliche, but critically important. Part of my job as leader, I steal from Jim Collins in one of his narratives in Good to Great, where my job is to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, get those right people in the right seats, and then collectively work with that group to figure out, where are we going to drive the bus and how are we going to win?
Hmm.
And I
Sure.
share that as an example, in that part of the determinant to get the right people in the right seats is alignment of values and and culture. Peter Drucker famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Hmm.
If you don't endorse that, I don't think you get the notion of being successful in business.
Okay.
And I share that as an example to answer your question around the difficult times. I am fortunate, and quite proudly, I think, having an uncanny ability to surround myself with people that I trust, people that align to my values, people that align to what we want to accomplish, people that have the same cultural norms, people who think what I think is important, and people who believe that if that is a distraction, that how we can prioritize our time accordingly to ensure we focus on what is important.
Right.
I am fortunate that when we have difficult times, I have been able to surround myself with people where I can share that I'm nervous. I can share that I'm scared. I can share that I don't know what we're going to do. And to do that, you got to have a huge amount of confidence in those people. I have built
Hmm.
leadership teams wherever I've gone where I can share anything, be it personal or professional. And without that support, one might assume that I got to let all the burden fall on my shoulders. And those
Right.
are the people that kind of implode, or those are the people that make judgment decisions that aren't rooted in, I'll call, level-headedness, because they haven't had that external collaboration with a trusted group of personal advisors, however you want to define your leadership team.
Mhm.
And I am fortunate that navigating I can say the most complicated decisions, I have done entirely with the support in most recent times with my senior leadership team at NORCAT. We would not be successful without them. Hands down, full stop. My
Right.
job is to find those right people. I have found an exceptional team. They own a lot of the decisions of where we go, how we play, and how we resolve the very complicated challenges that we face. It is
Right.
nothing more sophisticated than that.
Gotcha. We have a comment here. Thanks, Don. Connection and trust from the right and inspiring leader is crucial. So we work hard to treasure those leader once we get to know them. Yeah, absolutely. It is really, really hard to find that kind of leader. And it's not even as much as, sharing the success, right? Because a lot of leaders talk about, oh, it's not about me, it's about the team, but when you really get down to brass tacks around what that actually means, to be a good leader is, it's like you said throughout this interview, that it's easier said than done, right? One of the things I'd love to hear from you, it's a longer conversation, is what criteria do you use, right? How do you know when you found the right person? How long do you give a person to kind of prove their mettle before you kind of kick them off the bus, kind of a thing? Those are all leadership qualities that have a combination of intuition plus maybe a little bit of science behind that, right? Because you've got data showing, success or not. So,
Yeah.
but I really love the idea that, without the decisions that are being owned by your senior leadership team, like they own the decision, that you can't be successful. And so, but ultimately also recognizing that you're accountable for that, right? You're accountable for driving the bus and making sure that people are in the right seats and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the example I'll give you, again, it's often kind of said flippantly around, what are the values of the organization? What are the cultural nuances? And you hear these discussions with CEOs, and most of them get it, but some don't. And the best way I describe how important it is you need to hire and fire based on your values. You need to, when going through the recruiting process, actually have your values clearly articulated and sit down and go, does this candidate embody and endorse, and will they celebrate these values all day, every day? If not, you can't spend the time with them. It isn't going to be a good fit.
Mm,
And
mm,
and and I find the flippant discussions around, hey, what are your cultural values? Like, what is the characteristics? What is the root drivers and sense of purpose of the individuals you're bringing on? If you don't establish that tone as a CEO within the organization, you will find yourself in very complicated, challenging situations. Like, how many CEOs or senior leaders will reflect that sometimes they endorse inadvertently, many times, toxic behavior by employees that know how to deliver on results.
mhm,
You get
mhm,
that tension. Well, so and so is just hitting it out of the park with their performance metrics. But when we really reflect, their means to the end is toxic. Well,
mm,
inevitably, you're going to be perceived from a leadership perspective as not making difficult decisions to correct that behavior or remove that person from the bus. Because I can tell you a surety, inevitably, what will happen, that toxic culture will spread, and the good people who need the support and value of the mentorship you can provide, they will eventually leave. And albeit short-term gain for that high performer who has a toxic cultural value,
mhm,
eventually everything will implode. And especially in small organizations, where if you get a few people that aren't aligned from a value perspective, if they start going in the wrong direction, small companies are so subject to the risk of implosion because of that. Larger
right,
ones have a bit more flexibility, as you could imagine. But when we're interviewing candidates and when we're looking to move someone out potentially, we always reflect, do they embody the spirit of the values in which the culture is that we're trying to create? If not, it's a very simple discussion. Mentor and coach to get them aligned, or we know at some point, even if this person is a rock star, it will become problematic. So let's put the wheels in motion. That's the type of leadership that actually defines reality, makes difficult decisions, and
Mhm.
really appreciates that culture, eats strategy for breakfast, which I fully endorse.
Right. One of the things that I talk to clients about, and also clients who are trying to start companies, is that there's the idea that you need to know your value proposition, right? So you need to know what value you actually add to the world, right, to society. But one of the aspects of value proposition is, so there's four things that I talk about: spin, so skill, passion, impact, and non-negotiables. So these four things added together are equal to somebody's value proposition, right? And the thing that we often miss out on is that last one, which are the non-negotiables. What are the things that are convictions that no matter what happens, even if there's skills that you enjoy and you're in an area that you're passionate about, and even you're in the right place at the right time because you have an impact, the non-negotiables are often things with culture is what poor leadership looks like, and yet you're going to let that get away with that, like, just because everything else works well, right? That's not going to work out in the end. So when people are looking for new roles, right, they're either transitioning or they're not happy with their sometimes oftentimes the easy way out is to take that next role up that does more of the same, that gets paid more with a bigger title. But then along with that comes with the toxic behavior, the non-negotiables that they themselves, with reflection, would say, I don't really want to be there because that's kind of why I became unhappy to begin with. But they'll take
Yeah.
that on. They'll take that on because like you said, short-term gain for themselves,
Yeah.
right, is bigger than the non-negotiable. So
Yeah. For long-term success, I fully endorse the means is just as important as the end.
right,
And if you don't appreciate that, whilst things may work in the short term, eventually the wheels will fall off the bus.
right,
And I've seen it time and time again. And it's critically important to get your head wrapped around that. And again, everything I've said is easier said than done. Make no mistake. And I also operate in a world where there are no absolutes. Everything can be a negotiation. There can be gray areas. There can be porous perspectives, as we often call it. Working in pure absolutes can be a downward spiral of frustration. So there's always an understanding. There's always context.
right.
There's always more to the story, and unpacking that is always important. Takes time, takes effort, but I think that's an important thing to understand when you endorse the phrase of the means is just as important as the end.
Right. Well, thank you, Don. We're up at the top of the hour now, but very, very insightful conversation as always. And I can certainly tell that you're so much more mature as a leader and so much more effective. Not that you weren't back then, but the first time that I saw you, so much more articulate that I'd love to have you come back and talk about some of the topics we started on today. But I'm just going to end off with a few fun questions. So these are going to be rapid fire questions that you don't know about. Okay.
Okay.
And I always end up with 3 or 4 of them. So just, first thing, the top of your head, don't worry about it. It's not an exam or anything like that. But
Yeah.
okay, first one, a little more serious. So who's your favorite CEO that you'd want to spend a day with? If I could just transport you and you just shadow them to death, and who would that be? One only.
Oh, of any time in history.
Sure.
Wow. I think it would have been interesting to see maybe Steve Jobs. I think that would be interesting to see the origins of Apple and that story. I think it would be interesting just to have had a conversation with him.
Right. Okay.
If I think about this longer, by the way, I'll come up with probably a dozen other ones.
I know. That's why they're
But
rapid fire. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
What's your alter ego profession? If you weren't doing what you're doing, what would you be doing?
I know we've talked about being a musician, but that would probably never happen. That's a great question. You know what? Professional tennis player.
Okay. You play
Love
tennis?
tennis. Love tennis. That's what I would do if I could have my dream job that was totally fictional and unrealistic. That's what I would do. Play tennis every day.
Yeah, you'd have to watch your knees because you are in your mid-40s, I think you were saying. So, okay. What book or movie title best describes you?
Oh, what book? Like a real existing one,
Yeah.
or just fabricate one?
You want to? No, a real one.
Oh
Good to
goodness.
great. Better to the best.
Okay, there you go. Good to great. You know what? I don't watch a ton of movies, right? So I struggle with that. Like
Okay.
one of my favorite movies of all time is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So maybe that could be a metaphor for
Okay.
different career choices or something to that effect.
Sure.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Top of mind. That's great.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's my sophisticated answer to that.
What's one word that you love?
Oh, one word that I love. Pass. I don't know. I have to come up with something here. Hold
Pass.
on. What is one word that I love? I don't know. I got to think of something. That's a great, yet somewhat strange question. I don't know what one word I love. Family. Family. Love
Okay.
talking about my family.
Okay. No, that's a very, very, very significant word. I was going to just give you one and say curiosity, or like, a phrase might be easier said than done. That's kind of like, it's almost like that should be the name of a book for you. Easier said than done, right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Um,
There you go. You have a different perspective. You know what the questions are. There you go.
I know. Okay. Last one. What's one word that you hate?
One word. I want to say, no, we can't, but that's not
Sure.
one.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Can't. Can't is your word.
Yeah. Very frustrating when someone says can't do it. Drives me nuts. And again, not working in absolutes. I'm sure there's reasons to suggest some things can't be done in a way that you want to. Figure out the context, build to understand the narrative, and then figure it out. Very, very, very frustrated with people who are very flippant and say, no, can't do it. Move on. Yeah, no.
Gotcha.
Maybe that be true, but let's just make sure we understand the context around that answer.
Great. Well, thank you, Don. Thanks so much. You're the first person I've stumped with a rapid fire question. My goodness, that's
That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing.
And I've done about 30 of interviews now. But anyway, thank you so much, Don. I really appreciate your time. It's been great catching up with you, and all the very best in your role. And looking forward to great things ahead. When I asked you how you were doing earlier today before the interview, you said wonderful, and it's great to hear that. It's a refreshing comment to say that. Wonderful. So stick around. Don't go anywhere. I'm just going to put you backstage, and I'll just close up, and we'll catch up afterwards.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. All right. That was hopefully very inspiring for all of you folks. If you look back at my archives of interviews, I think Don is probably the most articulate guy. I was trying to count the number of ums and ahs that he had, and there were almost none. So I wonder whether he scripted that. But anyway, it's for him, it's probably easier said than done, or it's easier done than said for him. But or easy as said as it is done, because he talks so articulate and so well. But yeah, if there's any takeaways from the interview with Don and the conversation with him, it's really that there's a passion that he seems to have for curiosity and trying things that are different and not being afraid of the what did he call it? Sort of the uncertainty, right? The pressure that comes with uncertainty that forces you to maybe the best out of you sometimes too. So in any case, hope you guys enjoyed that. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next week with another wonderful guest. Take care.